Welcome back to the second series of webinar on COVID-19. Today's topic will be management of severely ill COVID patients. Speaker will be Dr. Raja Nassar, who is the senior member who is there with GVC by inception as a senior consultant for our national EMLC, and is having rich experience like 30 to 35 years of Indian and also overseas experience. Is a senior consultant anesthesiologist, and he will be
Anand,
sir, please.
Okay, shall I take forward?
Yes, sir, please.
Thank you, Anand. Thank you for the nice introduction. I'm very happy. Many of them, even Dr. Ramana Rao, is also participating in this session. So actually, what I wanted to tell was, yesterday most of the things have been covered by Dr. Raveen, but I just wanted to tell about the outline of a little bit of pathophysiology so that you will be able to understand exactly what is happening in COVID and how it is managed. So are you able to see my screen? Are all of you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So what I'll do
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
so if you permit me, shall I mute all of you? Please mute yourself, because if I mute, something will go wrong. If you unmute, some other sound from the sides will be disturbing us. So I will be talking about the management of severely ill COVID patient. To start with, we all of us know that COVID is being affected by what you call a RNA virus. So I just wanted to brief you about the virus and how it entered. Frankly speaking, the pathophysiology of the COVID-19 virus, so that you will be able to know how the drugs which I am telling will act at a different level. So you see this picture. The one which you see is the coronavirus. That is, it has a RNA, single stranded RNA, which has an envelope and it is encircled by spikes, protein spikes. So this is the virus, and this virus will enter into the, what happens is this virus will enter into the respiratory system. So once this virus enters into the respiratory system, as all of us know, we have the air bags alveoli. These alveoli are lined by pneumocytes, type 1 and type 2 pneumocytes. And this particular virus will mostly attack the type 2 pneumocytes. Type 1 pneumocytes are also attacked, but mostly it has the affinity to get attached to the type 2 pneumocytes. The reason being, the type 2 pneumocytes, they have lot of ACE2 receptors. And that is the place where this virus will go and get attached to the type 2. This is a single pneumocyte what I am showing. And this virus will get attached to the ACE2 receptor. And from there, will enter into the pneumocyte. It will enter into the pneumocyte. When it enters into the pneumocytes, the single RNA will enter into the pneumocyte, leaving the envelope and all. And what happens to the single chain RNA is, it goes what you call as polymerase. It will multiply. It will multiply by rDNA polymerase. Okay, so and lot of RNAs are being produced. A lot of RNAs are being produced. This is one part of the cycle. This is one part of the cycle. The next part is these things, that is the RNA, ribosomes will translate, the ribosomes will cause translation of this RNA, these proteins, and then they form these proteins. And these proteins, by the action of proteases, will again form the protein spikes. Am I clear? So the RNA will enter into the pneumocytes. Once it enters into the, all systems in our body has the receptors, but respiratory system has high number of receptors, ACE2 receptor. That is the reason why it is affecting the respiratory system. And one more thing, let me tell you here, why children are not much affected is they they have this ACE2 inhibitors at a later stage. They don't have in the childhood. ACE2 inhibitors are not developed in the children. So that is the reason they say that is the reason why this virus is not getting, is not much in pediatric and children. So this virus will get to attach to the ACE2 receptor, and from there the RNA, single chain RNA, will go into the pneumocyte, and there will be replication and multiple what you call single stranded RNAs are formed. And the other part is again the ribosome. In the ribosome, that there is translation of these, and they form proteins. And these proteins, under the action of proteases, will form the protein spikes. These two things, what happen is they come out from the these two things, what happens is they will come out from the pneumocytes, come out from the pneumocyte and again enter into the alveoli. They again enter into the alveoli. Once they enter into the alveoli, the newly formed coronavirus will stimulate the immune system and macrophages, which is the first what they play, and they form, what they form is they causes a immune disturbance, and they produce IL-1, IL-6, all these mediators it will be producing once it enters into the alveoli, and then they started producing this. So the newly formed coronavirus will stimulate the immune system and macrophages and will come into play. Once the macrophages are activated, they will be releasing IL-1, interleukin-1, interleukin-6, and TNF, and these released factors will act on the capillaries surrounding the alveoli and cause vasodilatation. So once these things are formed, they act on the surrounding capillaries, they cause vasodilatation and increase capillary permeability. So you all know, once the capillary permeability increases, there is vasodilatation. What happens is there will be fluid which enters into this interstitial area, and fluid move into the alveoli and causes alveolar edema. And this finally can cause damage of the alveoli. There are a lot of disturbances which may occur. They finally may land up in ARDS. The other thing that can happen in the lung is they can cause lung collapse or alveolar collapse, and no gases exchange in between the alveoli and the capillaries, and there may be hypoxia and there may be shortness of breath. Hypoxia will cause, what it will cause is, it will cause fall of PaO2, arterial oxygen, which in turn will stimulate the chemoreceptors, and what it will do is, it will cause vasodilatation, and then what is the the hypoxia will fall, and this PaO2, which in turn stimulate the chemoreceptors, it will stimulate the chemoreceptor. This will stimulate the sympathetic nervous system, and again there will be, I'm not able to change the slides here. So beside and apart from that, the macrophages, the neutrophils also come into play, and they will release the protease enzyme, and which will also damage the pneumocyte 1. So pneumocyte 2 has been already damaged. They produce a lot of ribosome, newly formed RNA, and at the same time they damage the pneumocyte 1 and the alveoli, and further increases the permeability. So in a nutshell, I have drawn a rough picture. The virus will enter into the lung. It will go into the, this is a one alveoli, and it is lined by pneumocyte 1 and 2. So it will enter into the pneumocyte 2, and there what happens, the single stranded RNA will multiply into forming many RMAs and also RNAs, and also it forms what he calls protein spikes. The newly formed, this will come back into the alveoli and cause further damage of the pneumocyte 1. That is one part. It causes vasodilatation and increased capillary permeability, or it may cause alveolar edema, and it may finally cause ARDS. So these are the things which are happening. In turn, what is happening is there may be, because of this, there may be arterial oxygen diminished because of the there is no less transfer of oxygen from the alveoli into the blood. There is a diminished arterial oxygen concentration. This will stimulate the chemoreceptors. So once the chemoreceptors are stimulated, the heart rate and the respiratory rate increases. The other components is what this does is, this viruses, what they do is they also stimulate the hypothalamus. They also cause damage to the hypothalamus, and that may be the cause where it produces the fever. Other components, fever, other neurological complications can occur. That these viruses can also produce what you call it as a damage of the alveoli and all, and it may start producing sputum and cough. So these are all the things which are happening at the level of the alveoli and at the level of the capillaries, and where you are getting newly formed interleukin 1, interleukin 2, and finally they may go into what you call cytochrome storm, whatever you are hearing nowadays. Everything happens because of this pathophysiology. The other thing what happens is there will be what you call venous, once there is vasodilatation, there is peripheral vascular resistance is decreased, and there is a decreased amount of venous return. So once there is decreased amount of venous return, there will be a hypotension. Once there is hypotension, the blood flow to the oxygen, to all the blood flow to all the organs is decreased, and the oxygen delivery to all the organs is very much diminished. So that may finally lead into multi-organ failure, what you call ARDS. So this is, in a nutshell, the pathophysiology of the virus, how it is happening and how it is causing all these damages and all. So this is a rough figure which I have taken from one of the presentations. Everything is given, the whole of the pathophysiology is given in this. The virus entering into the lung, to the alveoli, from there to the pneumocyte, and then it is forming new RNA, and this new RNA again coming back and causing all the damage, vasodilatation, alveolar damage, everything is causing. It affects the hypothalamus and the brain, and that is the cause where we get fever, cough, sputum is there. Again, it will act on the heart and causes decreased venous return and decreased vascular resistance, and there may be decreased blood pressure, decreased blood flow to the organs, and they may cause multi-organ failure. So in a nutshell, this is this thing. Now coming to the treatment component, why I specifically told that pathophysiology, if you know the pathophysiology, how the virus is traveling into the system, then you will know what are the drugs and what are the drugs which level they are acting. Now coming to the first drug, hydroxychloroquine. Yesterday, Dr. Raveen has very nicely explained to you about all the drugs which are acting at different levels. So hydroxychloroquine acts by mechanism by inhibiting the receptors. It prevents the attachment of at this level. It will prevent the attachment of the virus to this ACE2 receptor. That is the reason why they say prophylactically use hydroxychloroquine, and even to afterwards also some of the people they advise to use hydroxychloroquine. This is the first drug which I'm telling. Next is when I was telling you about this picture, I told you the virus will enter into the pneumocyte, and from here the single stranded RNA will multiply by, it is stimulated enzyme, RNA dependent RNA. So what it causes, some drugs will inhibit this enzyme. Some drugs will inhibit this enzyme, and it prevents the multiplication of the RNA. It prevents the multiplication of the RNA. What are those drugs? Oral drugs are there, and you have what you call as a one oral drug, what very frequently it is favipiravir. Oral treatment, it is yesterday, it was very clearly told favipiravir, it's at the level where it inhibits RNA polymerase. RNA dependent RNA polymerase will help in the increase of multiplication of the RNA. So it inhibits that enzyme. So that is the reason favipiravir is used for 15 days, 1,800 milligram BD for the first day and 900 milligrams. And as Ravin has told, you get 200 milligram tablets where you can take, so for example, 1800 milligrams means it is almost 9 tablets you have to take. It may be very difficult to swallow. So that is the reason why many people, they don't want to take the tablet, or even if they take, the bioavailability of this is very less. So the action is not that much, what you call it as, whether it is, it acts. But favipiravir is very widely used. It is an orally drug. But all these antiviral drugs, they cause hepatotoxicity. So you have to liver function test and renal function test. Remdesivir also acts like favipiravir, but it is an injectable form. So many of the people, they prefer to have remdesivir. It inhibits the RNA-dependent RNA polymerase and prevents the replication of the RNA virus. It is widely used. It is used for 5, and the dose for that is 200 milligrams. I think nowadays it is very widely available in the pharmacies, where you get a packet which is having 5 injections, which is having 200 milligrams, if I'm not wrong. So, but whenever you are using this remdesivir, especially remdesivir, you have to do LFT and renal function test, especially the LFT causes high hepatotoxic and increases the enzymes in the liver. So this is the drug. First drug, chloro, acts at the receptor level. Then second two drugs, favipiravir and the remdesivir, they act at the RNA-dependent RNA polymerase, which helps in the multiplication. Now coming, I told you this RNA, one part is it multiplies, and the second part is it enters into the ribosome, and there is translation, and they form other special type of proteases will convert these proteins into protein spikes. So there is a drug called ritonavir. Ritonavir is the drug which acts at the level of the proteases and prevent the formation of these protein spikes. So the other drug very commonly is the ritonavir. Lopinavir and ritonavir inhibit at the proteases level. Hope I am clear, and I specifically drawn the diagram so that you will be able to understand at what level the drugs are acting. So at what level you have to use the medication, and at what level if you use the medication, the usefulness of that medication is there. That is the reason why now coming to the other drug, toxizumab. Toxizumab is a drug which causes interleukin 6 inhibitor. So especially what they do is when the patient is going to cytochrome storm, so they use this interleukin 6 toxizumab. So, but previously they were using, and they were finding that this drug is of not much use. But finally they came to know that this drug is used in the correct time, at the correct place, then definitely these drugs are very much useful. That is the reason why now there is a lot of confidence for the intensivists who are working with these COVID patients, that this drug will definitely, these drugs which we are telling, which are in the trials may not have been completely completed, which are mostly on trials, will be definitely effective in this COVID period. Dexamethasone. Dexamethasone is an anti-inflammatory drug, dexamethasone or methylprednisolone. So it is very much useful. The one of the drugs which has been proved is dexamethasone. 0.12, yesterday I've taken this from Dr. Ravin's slide, 0.1 to 0.2 milligrams per kg is used. Normally 6 milligrams to 8 milligrams IV can be given for 5 days. So the difference, use dexamethasone or injection methylprednisolone. One thing when it comes to the steroids, I will tell you, our intensivist, our critical care specialists, all they were using these steroids from a very long time for ARDS. It is not new for them. But especially for the fibrotic lungs and all, which were not responding to any medication they were using. But now, at a later stage, it was proved in COVID-19 also that these drugs are of very use. Especially, they were using methylprednisolone. Methylprednisolone is also a good anti-inflammatory, but it is more of immunosuppression. Dexamethasone more of anti-inflammatory and less of immunosuppressant. So many of them, they prefer to use dexamethasone in our country, and some of the developed countries, they try to use methylprednisolone, because in our country the cost, the what you call is the cost of this methylprednisolone very high. So they don't use so frequently as they use dexamethasone. There are other drugs which are all proved very helpful in the management of these COVID patients. These are the budesonide inhaler. Budesonide inhaler, they cause very good bronchodilation, and at the same time, they say that it also acts as an anti-inflammatory. N-acetylcysteine also, it causes anti-inflammatory effect. Colchicine, as it is also a potent anti-inflammatory treatment, which now in the present management of the ICU patients, they are using all these drugs. Anticoagulants. Why we want to use anticoagulants? Because of the cytokine storm and all, there is a clotting mechanism that is occurring within the blood vessels. So prior to that only, we are using unfractionated heparin, that is or low molecular, where heparin can be used. And in the tablet form, even aspirin is also given when people for mild to severely form affected people, they recommend to take a dose of aspirin every day to prevent the clotting effect of the case going on. Plasmapheresis. Plasmapheresis, we all know, antibodies, they develop at a later stage. They develop at a later stage. So what they are doing is they are taking the plasma of the infected person after the infection has gone, after 20 days, where he has proved negative, and then they see whether IgG and IgM antibodies are there. If there are IgM antibodies which are there, then they don't like to give that. If only IgG, large volume of IgG antibodies are there, then they prefer to the patient. So this is one of the treatment management in the severe COVID patients, where they are trying with plasmapheresis to reduce the severely ill patients to cure them. Now, one of the things in the management, I wanted to tell you about supine and prone position, because there's a lot of people who are talking about supine and prone position. Whenever you are lying, normally we lie in supine. But if you think among yourself, when you lie on a bed, and when sometimes in your bed, you are not lying completely, and 100% sure, most of them, they don't lie completely for 24 hours, the whole night in the supine position. They turn to one side, left lateral position, right lateral position, and prone, because they feel more comfortable. They lie in this position. The same is applied in the management of patient. They say that you have to make the to lie on his own, so that he will be in a prone position. What happens? The base of the lung, they expand a lot, and there is increased amount of oxygenation, and this oxygen will go into the blood, and then this oxygen saturation. Even when the patient is put into on ventilator, there was a question recently, I think Dr. Keshav or somebody was asking, sir, can we give non-ventilation when the patient is non-invasive ventilation when the patient is lying in a prone position? You can give nasal prawns, you can mask. Yes, but again, I reconfirmed with all the people who are practicing in our heart of the city of Hyderabad, and people in Delhi and all. Most of them, they are also non-invasive ventilation through in the prone position. So 30 minutes to 2 hours, you make the patient to lie in the prone position. Then afterwards, again 30 to 2 hours, 30 minutes to 2 hours, again they make the patient into right side, and then left side, then make them sit. So they go on changing position so that the oxygen saturation can be increased. The oxygen delivery from the alveoli into the capillaries can be increased. That is the purpose of prone position. So prone position is one of the management, put it in the management of the patient, especially whether the patient is on simple oxygen mask or invasive CPAP or whatever it may be, or a patient is intubated also. Prone position is the preferred one, what they can do. Now coming back to the most important in the management is oxygen, oxygen, oxygen. So with this oxygen only, we are able to manage these patients. So when you come to the management of patient, you have to know about the cylinder. As all of you know,
Yes, sir.
just no, actually my this got stuck up. Okay. Many people are, some of the people are joining. Once they join, I think they get. So oxygen is the main management of these patients, and oxygen, you have to know about the oxygen cylinder. So oxygen cylinder, it is normally, it has a regulator and a flow meter, and there are different types, A, B, D, and please don't talk. I didn't unmute everybody. So oxygen cylinder is having a black body with a white shoulder. So instead of me again repeating this, recently we developed one video of this oxygen delivery system. So I just wanted to play this. Don't know whether it will play or not. So that most of the things that are there that have to be know about oxygen cylinder has been just 3 to 4 minutes. So please watch the video. Whether I will be able to play it or not. Are you able to hear?
Audio is not coming, sir.
Still audio is not coming.
No, sir.
Okay.
Maybe you can give voice over, sir.
Are you able to hear or not?
No, sir. No voice coming, sir.
Okay. So these oxygen cylinders, actually, if you speak, they are different types, I told. And then the color is black body with a white shoulder. And now next is, it is having a regulator. It is having a regulator. Why this regulator is, the oxygen comes from the cylinder with a very high pressure. So we have to reduce the pressure. Normally the pressure is 2200 psi. So we have to reduce the pressure. So that is the reason you have a pressure regulator. Some people use a single stage regulator. Some people use 2-stage regulator. Some people use 3-stage regulator. 3-stage regulator is the best if you ask me, because it will reduce the pressure in 3 levels, at 3 levels, 2000 to 2200 psi pound square inch. It reduces 1500. First stage it will reduce to 800. Third stage it will reduce to 50. So it will reduce the pressure in different stages. All of a sudden, if you reduce the pressure from 2200 psi to 10 to 15 psi, it may cause combustion. It may cause combustion. That is the reason of a regulator, to reduce the pressure what you are doing is you are using a regulator. Next, after the regulator, you have seen there is a flow meter. So this is to adjust the flow, how much oxygen you want. Now the capacity of the oxygen cylinder, normally what we use in the ambulances is D-type oxygen cylinder. You might have seen big oxygen cylinders, the D-type of oxygen cylinder. They say that the D-type oxygen cylinder will take a water capacity of 48 liters. That means if you pour water into this cylinder, it will fill up, it will take 48 liters. But that is a liquid form. The gaseous form, it will take 7,000 liters. It will take 7,000 liters in this cylinder. So a D-type cylinder has a capacity of nearly 6,500 to 7,000 liters. A B-type cylinder is little bit capacity of 2,700 to 3,000 liters. It's a smaller, little bit smaller type, B-type. But the D-type, normally we use D-type. And another people who use a central oxygen system, they use a bigger than D-type, E-type or F-type, which are very big oxygen cylinders, and they are outside the theater or outside the ICU. And then they connect a central connection where the pressure is reduced there, and then finally the reduced form of the pressure, that is 10 to 15 psi, which has to go to the patient, will be come from the final stage of this oxygen cylinder. So that is the, you have to know about this oxygen cylinder, how to use it. At this time, this is the main important management of a patient course. Wherever a COVID is there, what they need is oxygen, oxygen, oxygen. And you have to have a monitor to know the saturation of the patient. So pulse oximeter and oxygen will definitely help to see the condition of the patient, whether he is in a mild form or he may have to be situated to it. So this is a D-type oxygen cylinder, what I have talked. So that is a capacity. One thing you have to know that with this 2,200 psi, nobody will give to the patient. That much pressure, if it goes, it will cause a, what you call it as a barotrauma or lung trauma. So they will cause a, what you call as a barotrauma. They will call a barotrauma. So that is the reason why we have to reduce the pressure and deliver oxygen at a level of 10 to 15 psi. You see, where is 2,200 psi and where is 15 psi? So you have to deliver the amount of pressure that is going when a person is keeping mask is only 10 to 15 psi. 10 to 15 psi. If you give higher level, you cause barotrauma. And how is it reduced? By the pressure regulatory valves, by pressure regulatory valves. So this is about the oxygen cylinder, and to deliver this oxygen cylinder, you have different this thing is very good. So now, while delivering the oxygen delivery system, you use different equipment like nasal prawns, simple nasal prawns. When you give oxygen with simple nasal, short nasal, you have to give amount of oxygen to the patient. You have to give very low oxygen, like low flows of oxygen, like 5 liters, 2 liters, 4 liters, maximum more than 6 liters should not be given with simple nasal prawns. Because if you give more than that, they will damage the nasal mucosa. That is the reason you have to give very low flow oxygen. Second is a simple face mask. The simple face mask is you can put the mask and give high flows of oxygen. But this high flows of oxygen means there are two terms. One is low flow and another is high flow. Anything below 8, 7 and all are all low flows. Anything above 8, 9, 10 are high flows. So normally they keep a demarcation like 5 and 10. 5 is low, is high flow. So whenever you are delivering, you want to deliver with high flow, you have more than 10 liters. Even Venturi mask. Venturi mask is a mask where you keep it to the patient and you can adjust the amount of oxygen that you are delivering. Deliver 20% oxygen, you can fix it at 20% and you will deliver 20% oxygen. If you want to deliver 60% oxygen, you can deliver 60%. If you want to deliver 100% oxygen, with the principle of Venturi, it will. Now, bag mask ventilation. Bag mask ventilation also, you can give as much flow as you want. So, high flow oxygen, with what are the devices which you, high flow oxygen is apart from nasal prawns, you can give with any of the devices, you can give oxygen. Bag mask ventilation, CPAP. CPAP is a device where you use it as for non-invasive ventilation. Now, very commonly, most of the patient, when they are getting oxygenation, they are being delivered by very what you call it as a this non-invasive methods like CPAP, BiPAP, all these things they are using. The reason being, you don't want to intubate the patient. Invasive is for introducing an endotracheal tube and you are maintaining the saturation of the patient by introducing the endotracheal tube, and through the endotracheal tube you are delivering the oxygen. But here you are not putting any endotracheal tube. Anything non-invasive means nothing which is not invasive. For example, NIBP, non-invasive blood pressure. When you tie a cuff and record the blood pressure, it is called as NIBP. And IBP is when you put a cannula in the artery, and then when you record the blood pressure, that is beat to beat blood pressure. So similarly, invasively you are not delivering oxygen. Non-invasively you are delivering oxygen to the patient, and this is the best form of delivering oxygen, because once you paralyze the patient, if you want to go invasive method, you have to sedate the patient very deeply. You have to paralyze the patient. You have to stop his breathing. You have to natural breathing. You have to stop, and then endotracheal tube has to be put and then delivered. That is invasive. That is very dangerous. So that is the reason why dangerous, in the sense many of the patients, they may not have that much resistance and then they not come back from the intubation component. So most of the patients, what they are doing is they are ventilating the patient by non-invasive. Not all the non-invasive methods like bag mask ventilation, Venturi mask, CPAP, BiPAP, high flow nasal oxygen. I just not told with simple prawns you should not deliver, but there are special devices, special equipment where you can give very high flows oxygen, 30 liters, 40 liters flow, 30 liters, 40 liters flow oxygen to the patient. So with high flow nasal oxygenation also, they are most of the patients which are maintained in the ARDS patients or the COVID patients are maintained with high flow nasal oxygen system. Now the next part, so I think oxygenation and all, I have told you this much, be that much enough, but as of now, because of the short period, it cannot go into the depth and all. If any questions are there, I'll take at the end of the session. Now, what are the aerosol generating? This is very important in COVID situation. When you suction a patient, so what is happening? The virus, where is the virus? The virus is going into the nasopharynx, and then it may go into the nasopharyngeal region and then down into the. So whenever you do suctioning, there may be the aerosol generation and the virus may spread out. So that is the reason they say avoid suctioning as much as possible, especially when you are suspecting it as a COVID patients. Avoid suctioning as much as possible. Steam inhalation, many of them, they say steam inhalation. Steam inhalation is a fantastic thing, but that is also aerosol generating. That is the reason they say that don't do steam inhalation in an open area where 10 people are sitting. You go to a confined room, take that room, this regular room as a steam inhalation process, and do steam inhalation on your own. You should not have people around you, because again, that is a aerosol. Nebulization, you do a lot of nebulization. I don't say that you should not do all these things. You should do, but you should be careful because there is a generation of aerosol. Nebulization, when you are giving nebulization also, there is a chances that a lot of particles may spread. So the virus may spread around into the atmosphere. So you have to be very careful while giving nebulization also. And the most important is airway management. When you are managing the airway management, when you're taking airway management of the patient, there is a high chance that there will be aerosol. So that is the reason why we are telling that when you are doing CPR in a patient, you cover the patient's face and then you do chest compression. Then you do chest compression. That is the reason. So that the plastic sheet which is covering the patient, it will not allow the aerosol generation openly into the atmosphere. So this is the normally this is the plastic cover sheet where we cover the patient and then we do airway management. Whenever you are doing bag mask ventilation also, you have to cover with a transparent plastic sheet and do a bag mask ventilation. And here, let me add you, whenever you are doing bag mask ventilation or whenever you are intubating, there is one more device called what you call as a which prevent the HEPA filters, which what we call it as a filters. Nowadays, they are very widely used. HEPA filters are very widely used now because they the virus which is a very small particle, they may get trapped in this HEPA filter. So whenever you are doing bag mask ventilation, between the bag and the mask, you should put that HEPA filter. So mostly now, I don't know, some of the ambulances may already be having plastic bags and some of them, pardon? Anand, you want to sell something? You have a plastic cover or you may be having HEPA filters in the ambulance also. If it is not there, we'll recommend to have this. So because it will prevent the aerosol generation into the atmosphere. So this is another thing is, what we have noticed is about the aerosol box. Aerosol box. This aerosol box is also very useful, but I cannot recommend you to keep it in ambulances and carry this aerosol box. But when we are intubating a patient, we are using this aerosol box. This aerosol box will have two openings where you can put your hands and then you can do laryngoscopy with one hand and you can put endotracheal tube. And it will cover the face of the patient. So the aerosol that are generated will not come out into the atmosphere. So that is the purpose of all these devices, to reduce the aerosol generation. So next coming, mostly I think I have covered the most, I have told all the critical components, what management has to be given to the patients and all. Many of them, they ask this question about this test, RT-PCR. Rapid antigen test, antibody test. Yesterday, he has already told, Dr. Ravin has very clearly told when to do RT-PCR. It is a very specific test. Yesterday, he was telling that 60%, it is not 100% sensitive. If a person is RT-PCR, you cannot take that 100%, it okay, he's having COVID. It is 60 to 65% sensitivity is there in RT-PCR. But along with RT-PCR, if you do a X-ray or HRCT, high resolution X-ray of the chest, then if that is also positive, then you can take to 95 to 96% or 100% positivity that the patient, sensitivity that the patient is having COVID patient. But single test RT-PCR will not give you a 100% sensitivity of the test. And what does this RT-PCR detect? It will detect the virus. RT-PCR, nothing but it will detect the RNA virus. They take it from the nasopharyngeal swab and it will see whether the virus are there or not. That is the one. Rapid antigen test. When are these rapid antigen tests formed? After the virus enters and then there is some reaction, then you will get the antigen formation in the body. So this will come positive only after 4 to 5 to 6 days. It will not come on the first day. You cannot get an antigen test positive. Even the RT-PCR may not become up to 24 hours positive. After 1 or 2 days, 1 day, they may be positive, but immediately they may not be. They may not be, I'm telling, they may be, but they may not be. Less chances of being positive in RT-PCR also. But antigen, rapid antigen test, it will come positive only after 5 to 6 days, after the antigens are formed. This is the second test which are doing popular very widely. The third is the antibody test. Antibodies, just now I told, for plasmapheresis, antibodies are developed. The body has a self-defensive mechanism. Whenever something foreign body enters, it will try to protect itself. So it develops, for the antigen, it will develop antibodies. So antibodies that are developed or start developing is IgM and IgG. So, but IgG, whenever you are giving plasmapheresis, they see that the IgG antibody should not be there. So at the later part of the disease, after 20 to 15 to 20 to 25 days after the patient has got rid of the disease, then only his high level of IgG antibodies will be there. That is the reason after 20 days after he gone out rid of the disease, they take the plasmapheresis and then they try to give to a patient who is suffering from COVID patient, so that these antibodies will go into the blood of that patient and it will act against the antigen and it will destroy the antigen and the patient may cure partially. That is the reason of giving plasmapheresis. So you may say that, sir, how about the other blood products? Can blood be given? Yes, blood can be given. FFP, mostly there is not much difference between fresh frozen plasma and the plasma that is taken from the patient. The only difference is he is having the antibodies, freshly formed antibodies. In FFP, fresh frozen plasma, naturally frozen plasma, antibodies are not there. So many of the patients, until they get the plasma from the infected patient, post-infected patient, they give FFPs and then try to manage the patient. So these are some of the things. I think I shortened this as much as possible, but the main purpose of drawing these diagrams is I thought that if I put the diagrams, it may be very useful for you and you will know the level of action of all these drugs. Can I have some questions? Just chat box 16. I'll just see the questions. Please write queries. Please mute. I cannot hear. Please check your audio. Okay, done. At least 5 participants are not muted. Also, it is not a question. They're all something about muting and all. So, any questions? You unmute yourself. I didn't muted anyone. You unmute yourself and ask the question. Many of the things I have not covered. I'm expecting that I'll get a questions from you. You unmute yourself and ask if you have any questions. No questions? So I should say that routine dialogue. If somebody doesn't have a question, there are two things. He has understood everything or he has not understood anything of my lecture. So that is the reason he's not asking any question. He has not understood at all. Am I clear or should I repeat once? Anand.
Sir, may I request you maybe the real case scenario, maybe you have managed recently as you are there in the part of critical care team in many hospitals here in Hyderabad, maybe any of the case which may be helpful for us if they don't have any questions.
I give you some of the cases which I have followed it up, but normally I have not treated those patients, but we have followed up that patients. So most of the patients, what is happening is they are telling that, oh, the patient has a sudden death. He has a syncopal attack and he is dying. He has a sudden death. The main reason of the sudden death is what is happening is there are intravascular coagulation. I told you the cytochrome crisis is there. And what happens is there is intravascular coagulation. Clots will be formed and these clots will go into the pulmonary vessels and it may block the circulation and the patient may die. That is one of the causes. The other cause, Dr. Anand, what we have noticed very recently and many of the patient is, yesterday also I was telling what you call it happy hypoxia. Happy hypoxia is nothing but the saturation of the patient is very low. the saturation of the patient is very low. It may be, if you put a pulse oximeter, the saturation may be 82, 83, but the patient is not showing any symptoms. And this is very common in patients. This has become very common in patients. Nobody is able to define it, but exact reason nobody will be able to tell, but there are people are there. At the same time, there is one more word which has come out very recently is happy bradycardia. The patient has severe bradycardia and he doesn't show any signs and symptoms. He doesn't show any heart rate may be 2, but his blood pressure is normal. Everything is normal. Hemodynamically, he may be. So we call it as happy bradycardia. But what they notice is in this COVID from the intravascular coagulation, what is happening is there is a myocarditis. Please, can somebody mute him? Please mute ourselves. Okay, Chandra Prakash. So what we call it as a happy hypoxia. Same thing, happy bradycardia is nothing but the bradycardia. There is a severe bradycardia, but it is not causing any change in the patient. There is no syncopal attack. There is no giddiness. Everything is normal. So he's happy. That is called happy bradycardia. But what they noticed is the patients who have gone into this bradycardia frequently, 2 or 3 times, finally they landed up in problem. They had myocarditis. And the patient suddenly went into cardiac arrest. So these are the 2 forms of sudden cause of death in patients. I have heard about many patients. Everybody is telling, patient was all right. He was talking to his friend. All of a sudden we got a call that my friend, he's gone. So those are the things that is happening. One is the intravascular clot and another is the myocarditis. This virus is not leaving any organ. This virus is not leaving any organ, but it is affecting the respiratory system. As I told, the ACE inhibitors are in high volume in the respiratory tract. That is the reason it is going into the respiratory tract, and it is affecting a lot the respiratory system. It's not that is not the ACE inhibitors are not there. They are there in the kidney, in the nephrons, everywhere they are there. But still, mainly it is affecting the respiratory system because there are a high number of AC inhibitors. And I repeated this in my early part of the lecture that these AC inhibitors, the studies have shown that the ACB inhibitors, ACE2 receptors are very less, are not formed in children. That is the reason why this disease is not commonly occurring in children. That is one of the cause. That is one of the cause. I don't say that is the only cause, but that is one of the cause why in children there is less amount of effect of this COVID disease. But there are other symptoms which are occurring in like kwashiorkor, they're affecting the inflammation of the blood vessels, and it's causing kwashiorkor disease. But comparatively, when you compare with adults and children, this disease is very less in children. So if you ask me, one of the interesting is, to be frank, as of now, I am not practically going into the ICU and managing the patients, but definitely every day I am having what you call the interaction with all my colleagues who are working there in the what you call as the critical care and all. So what some of the interesting case which I have followed is the patient was there on a ventilator. Patient was there. He was very normal. He had a very mild symptoms. He was admitted. First day he was all right. Second or third day he became breathless. Second or third day went, because if you follow our pathophysiology, the virus, that means it has already entered the alveoli. It has caused the reaction. It has inflammatory reaction has started. So it damaged, and then he started shortness of breath. When does the shortness of breath occurs? When the patient goes into hypoxia, when he's starving for oxygen. Hypoxia is there, no oxygen in the blood. So he tries to breathe more. So at that time, that means 4th or 5th day. So same thing, we have seen the sequence for many of the patients. They have gone to that stage, and then Finally, some of the patient, most of the patients are 60% of the patient, they recover because they have good immunity. They try to fight the antibodies. They develop good amount of antibodies, and then the antibodies try to fight with the antigen, and finally they come back. But if the immunity is not good, then they deteriorate. They slowly deteriorate. This condition will slowly, as I was telling you, the stages. First, it will cause alveolar edema. When alveolar edema is there, there is hypoxia. If this is not treated, then they will go into some other thing like hypoxic, and then they will go into alveolar collapse. When alveolar collapse is there, alveolar edema can be there, and then there may be ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome. When there is hypoxia, again, arterial oxygen may be diminished, and this may stimulate the chemorespiratory, the heart rate increases, and finally, there may be decreased venous return, there may be decreased what you call cardiac output, less amount of blood flow to the organs, and they go to multi-organ failure, and then they land up in, this is the typical way how they are going, So now the situation is, I'm seeing many of the people, so let me tell this, many of the patients, how they are going. I'm generally telling, I'm not specifically telling you one case scenario, because most of the cases which I have followed have been improved, but very unfortunately, many of my close patients who are very close relatives to my known patients are, they have passed away. One of our close colleague, he was not an anesthetist. Very recently, he from Yashoda Hospital, he passed away. He was our age group, and then he was he was not even working in a critical care. He was working as an administrator, but he was affected with COVID. This was 1.5 months back. Then he was normal for first 1 week. The second week, he started developing the symptoms of breathlessness, shortness of breath, and all. They tried to put with the non-invasive methods. They ventilated him for almost 20 to 25 days with non-invasive, with the oxygen saturation of 90%. Still, they didn't switch on to invasive because they thought that if they go for invasive, maybe it is very difficult. They tried their level best, but once a situation has come where with this non-invasive method of CPAP, BiPAP, all this method with high flow nasal prawns, 30 liters of oxygen, that there is a separate device for this nasal, with that device they have given high flows. That means it will keep, the flow is so high that will be directly into the alveoli. What are alveoli? They are all air bags. So the air will go into the alveoli and try to keep it expanded, So with this high flow oxygen delivery system, they tried to maintain that person for 10 more days, but finally they were not able to do. Then they went into endotracheal intubation. They ventilated him for 3-4 days or 4 days. That also they were not able to maintain the situation. Then they did tracheostomy, which is the last resort, and try to maintain, but that was also not possible. And just 3-4 days back, now today is Wednesday, on the last Thursday, he was declared. They tried the level best. They have gone out of the way, and all the drugs, all the things that I have mentioned, the higher end drugs, the antiviral drug, the remdesivir. Remdesivir is a very, it has become now old drug for this COVID patient. The latest drug, the drugs which act at the interleukin 6, that is inhibitor, that also, the drugs were also tried for him, but it was no use. For many of the patients, one of this patient, another patient also, same hospital we knew that patient also, and we also helped him to give plasma therapy, but very unfortunately we were not able to maintain the patient, and finally the patient passed away. So there is a good things which happen and very bad things which we don't accept. And both these patients, I was of the attitude that the vigorosity of how they are managing that patient, I was thinking that both these patients will come out, but very unfortunately we were not able, or my colleagues or my friends or whoever it may be, they were not able to pull the patient out of that danger, and they passed away. So just like that I am telling, but most of the things now, in a trial. Most of the things are in a trialing phase. To be frank, most of them, they don't know what is the best now also. But one thing what they learn in this experience is they know what to give at what time, what has to be given at what time. For example, initially I was telling you the interleucin IL-6 inhibitors, they were giving at a wrong stage. Like after the cytokine crisis has come, they were giving the injection. But now they notice that just before the crisis. How they know that? By the blood parameters, like the lymphocyte count, all these things. D-dimers, by D-dimer, they will know what anticoagulant, how much anticoagulant has to be used. So now they have what we call, they have neutralized or they have modified their protocols, and they are able to manage the patients in a better way. I don't say not only India, but throughout the world, it is the same thing. If you go to UK, why so much of deaths have occurred in New York in the initial stage of the disease? Why? Because they were not able to know what drug has to be given correctly at what time. How they were not prepared themselves. There was not proper airway devices, airway equipment to manage the patient. That was the reason. But now they are prepared. So if you see the statistic, the number of deaths, naturally the percentage of deaths will be very, very low compared to the initial part of this COVID-19 disease. If you go for March, April, and now if you come to July, number of cases may be increasing. When you do more number of tests, naturally the number of cases increasing. But the outcome of these patients is very good when you come, when June, July is coming, the number of deaths are very less when you compare it that. There are some questions, Anand. Chandra Prakash, to everyone. I have.
He would like to ask something, sir. Please go ahead, Mr. Chandra Prakash.
Sir, can I share one pic? I have 4 questions.
Tell me. Okay, Chandra Prakash, tell me.
Yes, sir. I have a screenshot question.
Yeah, tell me. You can ask.
Can I
Yeah, you can
share
ask.
with you, sir?
Yeah, please share. Hello, Chandra Prakash. Where are you from?
I am from Bijnor, sir, UP.
Okay, bolo, kya hai question?
Can you allow me to share this screenshot, sir?
Kya bole?
Can you allow me to share this screenshot, sir?
I have to share the screen.
Yeah, sir.
I'm sorry. Actually, I'm very poor in this technology. I don't know how I can give the screen to you. You just tell me what is it.
Sir, host disable attendance is screen share.
I should go to share screen. Okay.
Okay. Side, you can go to share
Then
screen,
I
sir. You
should
can
give share,
give it to him, host. Multiple participants you can use.
Pardon?
Sir, this showing when I'm sharing this screenshot, he's showing host disable attendance screen sharing.
It's okay. Now you tell me what question you have.
Sir, some ventilator question, sir. Ventilator.
Tell me. Please ask me. What is that question?
What is the auto PEEP?
Auto PEEP. What is auto means self. So auto PEEP is what is PEEP? PEEP is positive end expiratory pressure. So when the patient is you are giving positive pressure. Okay. So inspiration and expiration. So PEEP is positive end expiratory. Before the patient is completely expiring his air, you are stopping his breath. Why you are giving is, it will give good oxygenation from the alveoli into the blood. The second thing is, it will keep the alveoli distended. It will not collapse. That is the purpose of PEEP, positive end expiratory pressure. Auto PEEP is nothing but the ventilator will itself detect what amount of PEEP is necessary for this patient, and it will be supplying the auto PEEP. That is the auto PEEP. Any other question? If you understand PEEP, you can understand auto PEEP. Self PEEP. That is, it will understand on its own, and then at that level only it will stop. the expiration, this is inspiration and this is expiration. So it will not come to the baseline. It has to come to the baseline, but before coming to the baseline only, it will stop, because when it stops there, good amount of oxygenation is there from the alveoli into the blood, and the collapsed structures may distend. So auto PEEP is automatically, it will at the desired level, at the good level, it will stop the PEEP and then it delivers the oxygenation to the patient. Any other question? Chandra Prakash साहब, और कुछ है क्या? Where has he gone, Chandra Prakash?
Yes, sir. Okay, sir. I got answer.
Yeah. Any other question?
No, sir.
Okay. So that is the thing. And another thing, actually, I didn't tell you, because you have poked me and you are asking me about that PEEP and auto PEEP. So I should
Yes,
tell
sir.
that whenever you are whenever suppose you are traveling in a what you call in the ambulance, and you are by chance you are a patient, you have a ventilator with the patient. The best way is to watch the monitor, and the second is watch whether the chest expansion is there or not, for the tube is in the correct position or not. Okay.
Yes.
And the
Yes,
things
sir.
you have to see is the saturation. The things which you have to see is saturation. And one more thing is there in the ventilator is FiO2. FiO2
Yes, sir.
is
Fraction of oxygen.
fraction inspiratory oxygen. That is in
Yes.
decimal. That is 0.2 रहता, 0.2 से शुरू होता. 0.2 बोले तो 20% ऑक्सीजन. अपना एटमॉस्फेयर में है तो 21% ऑक्सीजन. तो एटमॉस्फेयर में ऐसा उतना ऑक्सीजन पेशेंट को जा रहा. 0.2 रखे तो 0.3 रखे तो 30%. अपना एटमॉस्फेयर में 0.2% है, 20% है, मगर आप 10% ज्यादा दे रहे हो उसको ऑक्सीजन. 0.5 बोले तो 50% ऑक्सीजन. और वो FiO2 कहां तक रहता बोले तो लास्ट इज 1. 1 means 100%. That means you are giving 100% oxygen. There is no mixing of gases. Only oxygen is there in that. And one more thing I wanted to tell about this oxygen delivery system. I can go along. Anand, you have time? Oxygen delivery system, I talked only about the cylinders. There are oxygen concentrators. There are medical oxygen devices. These are the three devices. Oxygen cylinders is very widely available and very comparatively very cheaper, and you can store a lot amount of oxygen. Now the central oxygen what we get normally, it is very economical. It is stored in the liquid form. But our oxygen which is there in the ambulance is in the gaseous form. So oxygen can be stored in the liquid form and then it can be generated into gaseous state, or it can be in the gaseous form itself. In the ambulance, that is the reason, if it is in a liquid form, we cannot make the ambulance lie down like this. It should be a vertical. So if you go to the hospitals and see central oxygen system, no of the cylinder will be lying down like this. They will be vertical. And then from there, because most of the cylinders, they'll be having liquid oxygen. And from there, they deliver to the points wherever oxygen is required. That is central oxygen system, that is called as. Next is oxygen cylinders are there by the side of the Boyle's apparatus, that is the anesthesia machine. Or oxygen cylinders may be there by the side of the bed to deliver oxygen to them. The second is medical oxygen. Medical oxygen is a oxygen which is purely oxygen, 100% oxygen, and it is only 600 ml, that is 0.6 liters. The medical oxygen system you might have seen, it is very small and different color. So that is a very less amount of oxygen is there. And normally what people do is, now for example, somebody is having sleep apnea. That means they in the nights they feel sleepy and then their tongue falls back and then they go into hypoxia. Those people, they keep this medical oxygen delivery system and then try to keep with the mask low amount of oxygen. Because if you have a medical oxygen system which is 2 liters, if you give 2 liters, that means 2 into 60, 120. So only it will come for 4 to 5 hours. If you give 2 liters, if you give 4 liters, 16 to 4, 240, for 2 hours only that cylinder will be over. So that is a disadvantage. It's a good amount, pure form of oxygen, but the disadvantage is very less, medical oxygen system. The other thing is the oxygen concentrator. Oxygen concentrator is a very good, especially now in the COVID period. We don't know, a time comes when there is no oxygen delivery. People may stop, sir, oxygen nahi mil raha, sir, ho gaya na, hamare paas, we cannot give you oxygen. Oxygen concentrators are things where the machine will absorb the atmospheric air, it will filter all the other gases, and finally it will deliver pure oxygen to the patient. It will deliver, finally it will deliver pure oxygen. How is it getting the oxygen from the air, from the atmosphere? It will absorbing the air from the atmosphere, and then their devices, their machines, they will purify, they'll remove nitrous, whatever has to be removed. And finally, at the end, you are getting a pure oxygen, and that you can deliver to them. Now, many of the houses, very rich people who are staying apartments, they are buying oxygen concentrators and keeping in their houses. It will cost you about something 55,000 to 60,000 rupees. But the disadvantage is you cannot give very high flows in that. You can give only 5 liters. Most of the devices, if you Google and see oxygen concentrators, and other disadvantage, what I was feeling it, but it may not be that disadvantage because there are filters in the machine, because it will absorb the atmospheric air. So it may absorb the virus also. But fortunately, we have different filters. It will filter the virus, and finally, the oxygen that is delivering to the patient is virus-free and pure oxygen, no other gases. So that is the oxygen concentrator. This is a device which is very widely now used by many people. They are buying it, and instead of oxygen cylinder, they are buying oxygen concentrator and keeping it. And that is not that use and throw. You can again, the equipment that are there in the oxygen concentrator, you can change that equipment after 1 or 2 years, and then it will be reused. So that is about the 3 deliveries units. One is the oxygen cylinder itself, second is the medical oxygen, and the most important oxygen concentrator I forgot, and I put it in the slide, but I forgot to tell you, the oxygen concentrated I wanted to tell you very much, because you have to know, many of the states in between also, they have mentioned that why can't we use oxygen concentrator in the ambulance? But disadvantage is they are very costly. 45,000 is an equipment. Oxygen cylinders, how much? Once you buy the cylinder, 10,000 rupees is the cylinder, and every refilling they'll take 400, 500 rupees. Now it may be costly. So it will be comparatively, it is very cheaper. So that is the reason why we didn't put, and it's a space occupying. You cannot keep under the ambulance oxygen concentrator. It has to be again in the cabin of the patient. So that is the reason why we didn't recommend oxygen concentrators for the ambulance. But now oxygen concentrators are very useful, and many of the hospitals are not buying, but especially individual levels, households, apartments. I know one apartment in Kachiboli, there are 400 houses there, and they are ready to invest whatever. So they have got 3 or 4 oxygen concentrators, and they are kept in one hall. So whenever somebody is in need of oxygen in that particular apartment, they come there and take the oxygen. So that is oxygen concentrator. Anything else? I see one question. I think it was from Hardik. What is the pathophysiology? Dharmendra Singh. What is the pathophysiology of happy hypoxia and happy bradycardia? Nobody knows exact pathophysiology, but they have found out this happy hypoxia. Happy hypoxia, other name is silent hypoxia. It is very silent. It is not showing anything. It is not saying anything outside. But when you check it, it is showing very low saturation. But what they say is, in the initial part of this happy hypoxia, the patient may not show any signs and symptoms. But this happy hypoxia, if it's continued for a longer time, all of a sudden the patient collapses. Maybe the patient may be having additional reserves throughout the body, where he is pulling oxygen in from here and there, and then using it for his own necessary cell maturation or cell metabolism and all. That may be the reason. Same thing with happy bradycardia. happy bradycardia is not scientifically, it has not come out. Our own people have named it happy bradycardia because the patient is having bradycardia, but still he is not showing any signs and symptoms. But this also same thing. The amount of blood that is with that, what is bradycardia? Slow heart rate. एक मार लेता फिर थोड़ी देर के बाद second मार लेता. So instead of 70, only 40 times the heart is beating. So this amount of oxygen this amount of blood which is going to different parts of the body may be sufficient carrying the oxygen and it is delivering. So that is maybe the reason why the patient is not showing any signs and symptoms. And these patients, as I'm telling you, mostly it happens in patients of myocarditis, where the virus is affecting the myocarditis. So after some time, when the oxygen demand is not enough and this bradycardia persists, all of a sudden they go into cardiac arrest. That may be the pathophysiology, but exact it is not completely proved, Dr. Dharmender Singh. Any other questions? How is prognosis of critical patient on ventilators are in your experience? I told. Sir, what can be the duration among the 3 tests for COVID-19? Anjum. So for RT-PCR, RT-PCR name is, other name for RT-PCR, rapid test PCR. That is, they try to do it very fast, but minimum it will take at least 8 to 10 hours or 24 hours. They cannot give the test immediately, but rapid antigen test, the name itself will give, say, rapid antigen, it will be given very fast, like not fasting, not in minutes, but within hours you can get. You can say that RT-PCR days, rapid antigen hours, and antibody test, it is in minutes. You blood and see the antibodies. It is within very short time, within half an hour also, you can get the antibody test. Did I answer your question, Anjum? Sir, can COVID-19 spread while using oxygen concentrator? Good question. So you mean to say, is there any aerosol generating in this oxygen concentrator? It will be there. If you see, you have to prevent that. What is aerosol generator? The organisms or the viruses should not spread out from throughout. For example, they have found out that ENT surgeons, orthopedic surgeons, where when they are drilling the bones, aerosol generation is very maximum. Why? Because where they are drilling the bones, then all the virus will escape. So if you take adequate precautions while giving oxygen concentration, through oxygen concentrator, giving the oxygen to the patient, aerosol generator may be very minimal. It will be same as how you have it for the other systems. It's not that it is not there, but it will be there. Anything else? Did I miss anybody's question? Mr. Dharmender, did I answer your question? Dharmendra, did I answer your question? You asked 2 questions, 1 question.
Yes, sir. So it was about the spreading of COVID-19 viruses through we are using this oxygen concentrator.
जितना ऑक्सीजन सिलेंडर्स से दे रहे तो होता, उतना इससे भी हो सकता है एरोजल, बिकॉज अभी सक्शन करते अपन, सक्शन करे तो प्रॉपर सक्शन करे तो एरोजल जनरेशन नहीं रहता, मगर तुम कैजुअल सक्शन करे पूरा ओपन करके डेफिनेटली एरोजल जनरेटर करता. ऐसी ऑक्सीजन देते वक्त भी प्रॉपर मास्क फिटिंग नहीं है समझो तो डेफिनेटली थोड़ा ऑक्सीजन अंदर जाते रहता है, उसका एक्सप्रेशन से थोड़ा बाहर से एरोसोल जनरेटर हो सकता है. सो दैट डिपेंड्स ऑन हाउ यू आर यूजिंग द डिवाइसेस व्हाइल गिविंग दिस ऑक्सीजन कंसंट्रेटर. सेम लाइक ऑक्सीजन सिलेंडर्स, थ्रू ऑक्सीजन सिलेंडर्स कैसा यूज कर रहे, ये भी कब इसलिए बोलते हैं ना, होल्ड टाइट मास्क, होल्ड, एवरीबॉडी सेज दैट होल्ड टाइट मास्क, डोंट होल्ड द मास्क लूज, बिकॉज व्हाइल एक्सपिरेशन सम ऑफ द एरोसोल में लीक कैन कम आउट. Okay, Dharmender.
Thank you very much, sir.
Any other thing? Dr. Ramnara sir, you want to add anything? What do you see in COVID test and how to confirm positive? One of the PG PEC, I think I know somebody is asking. What you see is in RT-PCR, you are seeing the viruses. तो वायरस अपने बॉडी के अंदर लंग के अंदर जा रहे ना, वो वायरसेस अपन RT-PCR में करते हैं. और नेक्स्ट इज सेकंड इज रैपिड एंटीजन टेस्ट. रैपिड एंटीजन टेस्ट क्या है बोले तो एंटीजन को देख सकते हैं. एंटीजन कब फॉर्म होता है, ये वायरस अंदर जाके वो पूरा रिएक्शन होके एंटीजन फॉर्म होता. रैपिड एंटीजन टेस्ट से अपन वो देख सकते. थर्ड इज एंटीबॉडी टेस्ट. एंटीबॉडीज कब फॉर्म होते, जब एंटीजन अंदर गया, अपने को डैमेज कर रहा, आपको अपने को प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए ऑटोमेटिकली एंटीबॉडीज फॉर्म होते. सो एंटीबॉडीज कैन what you can see is, you can see the antibodies in the blood when you are testing it. So what we can see in the COVID test and how to confirm positive is, when you confirm the virus in the RT-PCR, it is positive. When you confirm the COVID rapid antigen test and you have positive, then it is positive. But again, there are, if suppose somebody is having a symptom, okay, and he is having rapid antigen test negative, don't take it that he is negative. You have to reconfirm it with RT-PCR. If he doesn't have any symptoms, rapid antigen test is also negative, then you may think that he is not having COVID, you can leave it. But if he is having symptoms and rapid antigen test is negative, then you have to do the RT-PCR to reconfirm whether he is really having COVID or not having. So rapid antigen test is not very sensitive or very good for us, but RT-PCR is very good for us comparatively. But even people to confirm more after doing RT-PCR, what they do is they do the X-ray chest also. They do the HR, high resolution scanning of the chest to see any lesions are there. Because if you're having positive and then you are having lesions, that means the patient is not in a mild form, is in a moderate or going into severe form. So that is 96 to 98% positivity there if you do both the tests. And antibody test, as usual, I told you, after the disease has gone, then only many of our friends, what they are doing when who are working in critical care and all, बीच में कर ले रहे हो ना, अरे क्या है कि मेरे को कोविड आके गया शायद, unrecognized, asymptomatic चला गया शायद बोल के, they are doing antibody tests because they feel that suppose if the COVID has come and gone, at least the antibody should be raised in the body. So one more question is there. Dr. Ramnara sir, you want to say anything? I answered this question and then you take over. Sir, few patients found positive after the COVID-19 after more than 1 month. So maybe he might have got reinfected, because now what is happening is the main fear of this COVID is the virus may not be a single same strain. It may mutate. So the patient might have been positive, he might have cured, and again the mutated virus might have affected, or the same virus might have affected. If the same virus might have affected, the antibodies will definitely prevent them. But the mutated virus has affected, the virus is getting mutated, is changing the levels here and there. So the mutated form, if it infect, then the antibodies will not prevent. So there is a chance that the answer to the question is after 1 month duration post-treatment, can it be positive? It can be positive. It can be positive. It may be some different virus. It can be positive. Mutated virus. Don't say different virus. Mutated virus. It can be positive. Mr. Anand and Dr. Ramnara sir.
Or it was okay.
So, Dr. Rajan Singh Rao, thank you so much. Today is International Tigers Day, right? Your presentation was something like a tiger. Very good, and my full appreciations for a very detailed, passionate presentation. You know, because of this COVID pandemic, and many times there is a surge in the hospital admissions. Nowhere in the world the patients are getting treated in the hospitals. We have observed that there is a 30% attrition in the doctors and nurses for various reasons, for fear, for their tiredness, they're becoming sick. So in few countries, the paramedics and who are involved with the EMS are now attending the communities in administration of drugs. So it is a very clear cut. I would use that for preparing India for the next 1 month, 1.5 months. In the worst case scenario, I foresee that we are attending about 6,500 to about 7,000 transportations every day in all our operating states. Some of them we will be having more critical transportations than what we have presently. And more people, more and more state governments are pushing people to be at home because the hospitals are far away, because the cost of treatment is very high, and treatment can happen at the homes also. So our EMTs and paramedics, if they have to rise to the occasion, I foresee that some of us may be asked to work in the emergency rooms or the hospital units. While, as an example for ECC, we are already managing a transit of the patients. And if the home care standardization happens, I would say that while there are staff nurses up to the primary health centers, but our EMTs are available at every village level. The second point is our own kith and kin, near and dear, our own circle, a lot of patients are using these drugs. So very important for our own workforce up to the EMT level, not confined to the emergency medicine learning center, that we should be oriented about the drugs. There's a lot of standardization, and the drug has got something like a double-edged sword. It has got some good things and the bad things also. And there's a dose when we will get the optimum results. So our own responsibility is to see to that our relatives, our friends are getting some standard treatment. If there's a change in the treatment also, this sort of a CMEs would also help. So the very purpose of conducting the CMEs, that we as the learning center participants, we need to be updated one. Second is that we should be ready to take up the different responsibility, newer responsibilities, as we have already risen to the occasion, and then we have been started taking the patients from the international airports. Now we are there in the contact tracing, we are there in the laboratories. Gujarat is now doing a Rath. They are directly going to the patients and they are treating many patients also, so that the hospitalization comes down. So next 2 to 3 months, if this sort of a community transmission happens, I'm sure that people who are all committed to the EMS may have a change role also. So it is important for us to understand this, orient this, and I'm sure that at an appropriate time we may have a very detailed, deep diving knowledge, skills, and then the right approach. We all of us have got that, and a right attitude we all of us have already got it. So I'm trying to use the CMEs as a preparation of the organization for the future endeavors. And in addition, that this knowledge should also help our own circle, that they get the standard treatment and they will be able to, like in emergency, I always say that reassurance is most important thing. Same thing, a knowledgeable member of our organization, associate, would be able to enable right use of all the drugs, what Dr. Raja has mentioned, what Dr. Ravi was alluding yesterday. So this is my keen observation. and see to that the use of oxygen and other non-therapeutic, non-pharmacological intervention, while I consider oxygen as a drug also. So it has to be given to the best of abilities based on evidences and scientific practices. So this is a comment which I wanted to share for the earlier CME. Today's, I'm sure that we will have some more CMEs. Anand, thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful comment on this 2 days session, and it was an excellent session by Dr. Raja sir, and tomorrow we'll be doing one more session, sir, on home care and home quarantine and pre-hospital areas will be touching it. With this, we would like to thank to all the participants, and we are going to conclude it.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, sir.
Thank you, sir.